What's up, everybody? Tim Anderson here, aka Renville, the Bearded Dwarven Princess. We're back for another episode of Mondays in Middle-earth with a couple of post-surgery kittens behind me. Luke and Leia have been spayed and neutered as of a few days ago. I just woke up from a bit of a nap, been watching over them. Chris has been helping, obviously. We got the mama and 5 kittens running around. We're looking for homes for those anyway. I digress. We don't have to talk about all that today. We are back the ongoing read through of the Two Towers right now. We've already made it through The Hobbit, we've made it through Fellowship of the Ring, and now we're into the Two Towers. We're going in today's episode doing Chapter 3, the Uruk-Hai, and Chapter 4, Treebeard from the Two Towers, which is Book 3 of the Lord of the Rings. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Don't forget to check out the other episodes in the playlist as we read through the entirety of The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings, and the Silmarillion leading up to the Rings of Power. And of course, don't forget to check out the other Rings of Power videos. In which case, unless of course you came from those videos to here, whatever. I digress. Don't forget to check out the Discord down below. We have a separate section set up in the server specifically for discussion around Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings, this series, so on and so forth. So let's just dive in. Of course, I should say spoiler alert. Maybe can I say spoilers for a nearing 100-year-old book? I don't know. Maybe. In Chapter 3 of the Uruk-Hai, we start out Merry and Pippin awaking in a great company of orcs, bound and captive. And we get an actual sort of a death scene here for Boromir, which is something that we kind of just skimmed over in the last, kind of at the beginning. We did get the sense of him having fought this great battle. But in this chapter, we actually get a text that says that there were 100 orcs at least, and they shot a rain of arrows, always at Boromir. So I wonder if this was actually 100 orcs, or if this is just Pippin's recollection of the quantity of orcs, given how small their stature is as hobbits. I don't know. Food for thought. Um, we also get this recollection from Pippin. He's feeling very down for himself, obviously, as a prisoner of war. And he says he wishes Gandalf had never persuaded Elrond to let him and Merry come along because they've been nothing more than a piece of baggage leading up to this point. And now they are also baggage for the orcs. And they're just waiting to be collected again. And he's hoping that Aragorn's going to be the one who does the collecting and not someone else. This is one of those scenes from Peter Jackson's films where I think it was brilliantly done when the orcs are debating what to do with Merry and Pippin. In the films, and I can't remember if this is in the theatrical films or only in the extended edition because I only ever watched the extended editions. But when they're talking about carving up the hobbits and the legs, they don't need their legs, do they? And it's a brilliantly done scene that just adds to the moment. And I think it's way better in the films than it is in the book, and that might be one of the few instances where I think the film did it better. But it's really cool. Um, there's this moment when before Pippin decides to drop his Lothlorien leaf, everybody gets visions, and I think it was who was it? A lifeless erudite, I think maybe who left this comment on one of my, or it was either him or Himvar, um, or Liam from Liam's Lyceum, who said something about the characters are always having visions, and that was something that I hadn't remembered from my previous read through, and Pippin has a vision here of Aragorn running behind them, tracking them, and whether or not this is just wishful thinking on Pippin's part, or if he's actually getting a vision of Aragorn tracking them, he decides to drop his Lothlorien leaf. And this is, part of, at this point, he's managed to free his wrists, and he's just keeping his wrist bonds on for show. Um, it's uh, it's just interesting whether that vision was real or just, hopeful thinking. Who knows? The orcs do a lot of talking here, like a lot of talking, and a lot of arguing amongst themselves. And we get a definite sense of the arguments between like the northern orcs and the Saruman orcs, and then there's the Misty Mountain orcs, there's the Saruman orcs, and then there's the orcs from Mordor. And the orcs from Mordor are doing a lot of bragging about the Nazgul. And it's just very interesting to me that we get so much more exposition in the book about the inner workings of the orcs. Uh, this is all this leads up to, of course, we know that the orcs are going to get taken out by the Riders of Rohan, and we leading up to this moment when they get taken out by Aemon and his men. So in this sense, we're actually going back a little bit, comparatively speaking, because in the previous chapter, the Riders of Rohan, we had Aragorn talking to Aemon, and Aemon explained what happened to the orcs. And here we're actually getting it from the Hobbit's perspective as it happened. So of course the orcs get wiped out. But as this is happening, Pippin's got this brilliant idea. Grishnak sneaks up to them in the middle of all this, and he's poking and prodding, and he's searching through their bodies because he thinks they're sleeping. Pippin gets this brilliant idea in his head. He's like, Grishnak's looking for the ring. And so he starts mocking him every time he asks about the ring. And he's like, Gollum, Gollum. And basically, Grishnak gets greedy at this point and is like, I'm going to take these two and I'm going to get the ring and I'm going to take it back and I'm going to become a famous orc. Only he gets greedy and he gets caught and he gets killed. And then the two hobbits manage to escape in the middle of the night and head into the forest, which of course leads us up to the Treebeard chapter. Now, I have to say that the Treebeard chapter, I just noticed my tuft of hair sticking out. My visuals just looks funny. This is my least favorite chapter so far, and I totally understand why they decided to cut almost all of this chapter completely out of the movie in the same way that they cut Bombadil out. This chapter does not move the story forward. It does, however, give us an insight into the massive amount of world building that Tolkien had done up until this point in terms of the history of the world and everything else. So, from that perspective, it's a very interesting chapter, but it does not move the story forward. It's a very slow, lore dump chapter. There's some great poems in here and everything else. Especially when we're talking about the Entwives. But we start off with Treebeard asking them about what they're called. And this is interesting to me because Pippin responds, we're called hobbits. And he goes, this is Treebeard's answer. He goes, hobbits? Who calls you hobbits? That doesn't sound elvish to me. Elves made all the old words. They began it. So remember, elves were the ones who started all language. And this is a very interesting look into how important the elves were in the grand scheme of things, starting everything. They're also the ones who woke the Ents up and created the Ents in the first place, or gave them sentience, so to speak. And when Pippin responds that we call ourselves hobbits, Treebeard replies that you shouldn't go around telling anyone your true name, which goes back to Tolkien's love of language and the importance of having true names for everything. There's a power in that. Very interesting. So, like I said, even though it's my least favorite chapter so far, it's there's cool stuff in here. Treebeard also mentions how his name is always growing because he is always growing. So his name is much longer now than it was when he was born at the beginning of time. Um, at the end of the day, while I can't say that I would have made the same decisions to do the things they did in the book in terms of how they adapted this particular chapter, everything happens sort of quickly in this chapter. And because basically they meet Treebeard. There's some backstory and everything else. There's some discussion about Saruman, where the wizards came from, and then more discussion about Saruman and how he's begun to cut down the trees and he's bred these orcs. And Treebeard gets very mad very quickly and calls the Entmoot. And there's the Entmoot. And basically, Merry and Pippin get handed off to this younger Ent, and they go hang out at his house for a few days while the Entmoot is happening. Then the Entmoot's over, and the Ents are marching, and on the way to Isengard we go, which does not, it's not like that in the books. In the books, the Ents are very reluctant to do anything. Treebeard has to, ultimately, they're not going to do anything, and it's the deviousness of the hobbits to, well, we'd like to go this way, and then the Ents take them that way, and then when they see with their own eyes the destruction that Saruman has wrought on the forest, that's what brings the Ents into action. Um, I can't say that I would have adapted it the way they did, but I understand why they made the changes they made from a visual storytelling perspective because it it seems too easy in the book in the sense that they get to the forest, they talk to the Ents decide to go to war. It's that simple. Um, Whereas the film makes it a more but it's to say they did the same thing with Faramir. They changed that element of Faramir to for a visual storytelling element. So I get it. Don't necessarily think I would have done it that way, but I do get it. Um, anyway, it's a good chapter, but it's not a chapter that's hugely important to driving the story of the ring forward. So it is what it is at this point. Anyway, we've gotten to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed as usual. If you want to continue getting more of these, check out the rest of the series. Like, follow, subscribe. Super thanks if you want to support the channel, and see you in Discord if you want to have greater discussions. Until next time, happy reading, everybody.